Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Behind the Visual, where I take you on a little journey behind all those visuals you see out there in the world and the people who make them. I am your host, commercial and lifestyle photographer Mark Hansen, and today this is for the photographers. Ian Spanier is an award-winning commercial and celebrity photographer who's going to be on today telling you all about his great photography and his journey along the way. He's got a new book coming out called Cigars, a biography, which he narrowed down to 170 images from 20,000, plus a little biography on cigars that a friend of his wrote, I think 80,000 words, something like that, I think he said. That's going to be very cool. We get to hear a little bit about that. And you can pick up that book on sigculture.com. So they've already started like pre-ordering that thing. So check that out for sure. You're going to hear his journey on how he went from being a photo editor to being a full-time photographer, where he also worked at GQ as an editor and then helped launch ESPN magazine. And the shoot where he got to meet his idol and photographer, Albert Watson. So that's a part of it. And guess who his mentor was? Photographer Harry Benson, the man who shot the Beatles. So he's got a lot to talk about. He gives a little bit of insight into his process and how he works when he goes on a photo shoot, what it was like to work with Morgan Freeman, Steven Tyler, Bob Odenkirk, Jeff Bridges, and even more. I mean, we discussed cameras, why he left New York, the time he had a photo shoot on an aircraft carrier where he was followed around by guys with guns 24/7, and how he asked the ship's commander to position two $30 million planes exactly the way he wanted them. So there's that. Lots of other fun, cool stories. I had a really enjoyable time talking with Ian. So be sure and check it out. And let me know what you think. Be sure to like it, share it, subscribe it, comment, all that kind of stuff. And here we go. Well, tell me a little bit about how long have you been shooting?
So I've had a camera since I was 6,
Yeah.
and pretty much.
So when you had a camera since you were 6, like I have too, but I didn't really get into like the SLR so probably like 7th grade. So did you have SLR in your hand at 6?
No, similar time frame. I would say I had a Kodak disc camera. I very much remember it.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember if it was around 4th, 5th, or 6th grade, but somewhere around that period of time, I did get my hands on an SLR, and I remember very distinctly because it was a Minolta. I only had one lens for it, but I remember that it was it's Japanese camera. And when you were shooting, if it was too dark, it would tell you with a very horrible Japanese English accent,
Really?
saying "too dark, use flash."
Oh, wow.
That always rings in my head. I don't know why, but I guess it conditioned me as a child. And then I basically, I think similar to a lot of people, I think I did some photography in middle school and then, in high school as well. And then I tried basically from that point on not to be a photographer forever. And it always kept coming back. I went to college first and foremost to play soccer. That's what I thought I was going to do for 4 years.
Cool.
I only played a year. I wanted to be a trainer for a pro sports team, and that was sort of my agenda in college. I went to a school that I could play soccer, but also not essentially be pre-med, but sort of on that same track so that I could learn more about physical therapy and all that kind of stuff. And so I was simultaneously playing soccer, volunteering in the training room, and figuring out that if I took art classes, I could get an A, keep my grades up.
Yeah.
And when spring trimester came around and photography was there, I was like, oh, I have a camera. I've done darkroom. This should be fine. So I started doing that, and slowly but surely started to spend more time in the darkroom than in the training room. And when soccer sort of went away, that was like a big shift in my life. I'd pretty much given up so much of my youth as to play soccer. And when it was sort of gone, that changed a lot of my perspective for where my life was headed, I guess. And then I was fortunate that I did it sort of an internship for a photographer's rep in New York one summer. And then I Followed that up the next summer working as an intern at Condé Nast, and there I worked at GQ magazine and really got exposed to a ton of great photography and what it was like to work in a magazine. And so then I
Yeah.
said, okay, well, I still don't want to be a photographer. I'm going to be a photo editor and assign photography and produce the photo shoots and all that kind of stuff. And um, I that was my path from that point on. And then even so far as I went back to GQ during a trimester break, and they didn't want me to go back to school. They wanted me to stay and keep working there, but I wanted to finish school. And so then the the funny thing was, I get there after college. They found a position for me initially in the archive. So I was actually going through decades and decades old photography of like these famous photographers who were doing this absolutely awful work for like House and Garden and places like
Really?
that. Yeah, it was amazing. And then GQ was able to open a spot up for me, and I went back to GQ. And within 2 weeks of being there, at the very last minute, something needed to be changed for a book review. And we didn't have time to assign it. This is pre-digital, so it wasn't so easy where you could just
Yeah.
send it out to get photographed. So I volunteered to do it. I literally only had a camera, a tripod, and a small flash, and that was it. And so I went to the art store, bought a piece of white paper. They always shot the book the same way. I set it up on the white, and I would put the camera on a tripod with a release, and I held the strobe in my hand and moved forward and back where I'd flash it and then close my eyes so I could see where the shadow was falling.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And got it to the distance that it needed to be and left my hand there, fired off a few frames, dropped the film off, and that started 6.5 years of being a still life photographer on the side of being a photo editor. And so in the 13 plus years I was a photo editor at all these different magazines in New York and Los Angeles, I always shot on the side, and it gravitated just very naturally from still life to then travel and then portrait and then celebrity and on and on and on. And eventually it got to the point where I got tired of hiring photographers who would, quote unquote, screw up the job.
Right. Yeah.
Even though I felt I was a very good photo editor and I was very good at explaining what, I wanted, I was very specific and I was always on set and all that stuff. And I just was starting to get to the point where I was capable of doing this stuff, teaching myself lighting, and being on the inside really helped because
Oh, I'm sure.
I knew the voice of the magazine. That's how I always explain it. And by knowing the voice of the magazine, there was nothing left. And that was really what I saw the hole was between the assignment and the photographer when they did not work out. And back then there was reshoots and things like that. Now, of course, there's not. And so seeing that little gap gave me the opportunity to say, well, I know exactly what this magazine is trying to say. And I was very good throughout my whole photo editing career at navigating myself from fashion to sport to even women's fashion and beyond, where I just could look at the magazine and understand what it was trying to do and mimic that in a sense, which didn't work well to finding my own voice as a photographer for a
Right.
while, but it did work well for me to have sort of a side hustle along with a nice salary and health benefits and all that stuff.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So I would assume you got to learn a lot about the lighting and everything, just how all these different photographers worked, and you could figure out what you thought was the best for you or what you liked best, and that's very cool.
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate in that not only did I meet my mentor like the first 3 weeks at GQ, which is Harry Benson, who's the photographer who came to America with the Beatles, and
Yeah.
you know,
Damn, man.
yeah, so I'm Scottish, he's Scottish, he latched on to me very quickly, and so he was great to be an influence for me, and I knew of him very much in college, so that was amazing. And then as well, assigning these amazing photographers who were the 90s. This is the 90s and early 2000s when photography was super, super important in magazines. It wasn't a dime
Yeah.
a dozen the way it sort of is now, and diluted a bit. And so, I mean, I'm on set with Albert Watson, who's like my favorite photographer contemporary wise, and to be able to watch him do everything. I always like to tell this story where I had assigned him to photograph David Bowie, and everyone at the magazine was like super jealous I was going to
Well, I
meet David.
bet.
And I was like, forget David Bowie. I'm going to meet Albert Watts. I'm like, this is crazy. And I remember very distinctly like meeting Bowie and like shaking his hand and saying, thanks for doing this today or whatever. And then immediately turning around and being like, so Albert, what's what's going to happen? What are we going to do? And just being super like sponge, just trying to get everything about how he worked. And I definitely would say he's a humongous influence on my lighting style. And we didn't have lighting in college. We had two Home Depot silver dishes with a regular light bulb, and that was it. So
Really?
yeah, so I blame all my knowledge on lighting partially from looking at photographers' work, and I was seeing everyone's portfolios
I'm
during,
sure.
but also really taking the natural world and trying to mimic the natural world in an unnatural environment. And so sometimes that's straight up, as I'm sure you know, and sometimes that's combining different light sources to create something. And I would get these influences from just walking around New York City. I mean, the light bounces around there so beautifully
Oh yeah.
between different surfaces and direct light and indirect light and, shade and all these different things that you get, that it was a great sort of teacher all along the way.
You- So you just started out great. It sounds like. I mean, even as a photo editor, you hit the I don't know. You just it sounds like you landed well.
I mean,
From the
it's
beginning.
a difficult thing to do when you're, 19 years old and you're
Oh
working
yeah.
at GQ, because what sort of happened as a theme over the next, 5 or 6 years was, where do you go from here? And
I'm
so,
sure.
I went from GQ to Esquire. There was a bit of a sort of group that left when the number two editor went to Esquire, and it was like a pretty big deal when that all kind of happened. And one editor in particular I had worked with a lot, and he liked me and he recommended me to move over there. And at the time, it was with this amazing creative director called Robert Priest. And, he and I didn't know each other really. We actually met once at GQ when I was interning, but I don't even think he remembered it. And ended up working there with him and loving it. And again, it's like you're here, and helped to
Yeah.
launch ESPN, the magazine, in its second year and
Oh
all that
wow.
kind of stuff. And having those experiences put me in a very strange spot as the years went on, because then I was like, what do I do and where do I go from here? And, by 26, I'm the director of photography at a magazine. And then what,
Yeah.
And I was literally telling somebody the other day that I sort of kicked myself a little bit for not learning design at that time, because I dabbled in a little bit when I was interning, but didn't really find it that appealing. But had I done that, I think I would have ended up being a creative director, because now creative directors do most of the assigning and photo editors are more producers in terms of, particularly what I see with magazines these days.
Oh
And
really?
so, yeah, and it's one of those things where I think I could have gone a very different direction in my life had I just done that, or even taken a job in advertising instead of sticking with magazines the whole way. I never really anticipated that the magazine industry would go where it's gone, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
probably so. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the when magazines were actually, like you said, 90s, early 2000s, where you actually got to go places and
yeah, and they paid.
yeah,
They paid
you got
well.
to go to the Caribbean or someplace or wherever you got to go and shoot someplace cool when they paid for it all. But yeah, anymore, nah.
No,
Everybody's like, who's local?
I was telling a group of students at a college that I was speaking at, that there was something called day versus space, and they were like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Well, if you had a day rate, let's say of $500, and then the story ran an additional page, you got another $500. And if it
Yeah,
ran 4 pages, you got $2,000, and your expenses covered, and no worries."
right.
And questioning if you have an assistant or if you need two assistants, that's okay. All those things just gone now. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
wild to me to see, most of the time. And I think people are still shocked by this when I say it, when I, show my portfolio to people who don't work in magazines or have not, where I tell them that quite often the photo person or the creative director calls me and says, are you available on Tuesday? And if I am, okay, here's your subject's phone number. Go ahead and set it up. And it's like they have no creative direction, no desire to be a part of it other than just matching a photographer to the subject, and that's it. And
Which is just disappointing. I mean, because
it is,
I
yeah.
mean, it's cool, I
Oh,
guess, but
yeah.
it's for me, it's rough when they do that and they just go, okay, here's what the story's about, go shoot it. And then you go, okay, what do you want this? Do you want that? Or do you want me, or do you just want me to just go out there and just wing it and shoot what I think looks cool and hopefully it works in with your story?
Yeah, it was actually, I like to say I took a positive from that in that, because to me it is very negative. I was super hands-on, even with guys as big as Albert Watson, like literally saying, this is what I want. This is the
Right.
mood. This is the vibe of the article. They used to give us the articles to read before we assigned it. So I was always looking at it from a psychological perspective, who's the right photographer for this subject, that kind of stuff. And the way that I sort of, you know, changed the way I viewed it was, this isn't a negative. This is them trusting me to be the photographer for the day and make those decisions because I'm a boots on the ground. And it actually boosted my confidence at that time when it
Yeah.
started happening, because it made me believe that they're hiring me for a reason and I just need to be confident in that. So I like to, blame any success I've had on lighting. I think everything comes back to lighting. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
I know I can light to tell a story, and that's always my objective. What is the story I'm trying to tell, and how am I going to use light to tell that story, whether it's artificial light or natural light? And, they're trusting me to make that decision for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that part, I mean, I think my first I did a shoot for a department store. And my first shoot ever for this department store, they literally were just like, here's your location, go there and shoot. And I got there and it was my first time doing it. And luckily I knew the stylist. I was like, is there an art director here? She's like, no. I said, is the art director coming? She's like, no. I said, well, what am I supposed to shoot? She goes, I don't know, just go shoot what you normally shoot, I guess. I'm like, all right. So I just went out and shot and they ended up, I mean, they used everything. They seemed happy with it all, but it was the first time that I'd shot something like that where they didn't have an art director, at least on set, to go, we're concentrating. I didn't even know what we were concentrating on, whether it was the pants or the top. So I just shot whatever I wanted to shoot, and
Yeah,
I guess it worked. I think it was more for just like the feel, the lifestyle kind of thing for the department store as opposed to a specific product. So that was cool, but it's kind of nice when I have at least some direction, I think, when I'm, going on a
I
shoot.
agree. I mean, I always say, when I'm being approached for a job, I ask a ton of questions.
Yeah, yeah,
And I have to make this sort of assessment whether this is a client that's going to answer those questions or they're just going to give me, a bunch of fluff. And if it's fluff, then I just do my thing. And
yeah, yeah,
if I can extrapolate even just a few words, that's typically what I'll assign to the lighting. And so if somebody says, well, we want this moody thing, then boom, I already know what I'm going to do. Or,
right.
we need this really bright and airy type feel, then okay, fine. And, it goes back to what you were saying about the experience of being around all those photographers. I'm a bit of a chameleon when it
For
comes to lighting.
sure.
I do a lot of different styles, and I fought much of my career people not understanding that I'm the guy that can do the bright and airy, but I can also do the dark and moody. And it's from that experience of working at all these magazines where, I was talking about that voice of the magazine. What I would shoot for a GQ is very different than what I'd shoot for Marie Claire.
Oh boy, yeah, yeah,
So, understanding how to do both puts you in a position where you have a better chance of figuring it out that day, especially when the client doesn't know what they want.
right.
And that is more important for what I do. I don't knock any photographer who shoots one style and one style only. That's totally great and totally fine. I wish I had that as my
Right.
thing, but I'm definitely somebody that always wants to change it up. I'm always, still at this point coming up with different ways to light things because I always want solutions to those challenges that come up out, and I don't want to ever not have an answer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree. I find myself even now doing it for however many years I've been doing it, 20 something years, still like finding times where I just like, oh crap, how am I going to shoot this? Come up with a solution for it. And I love it. I mean, it makes life a lot more interesting, a lot more fun, I think, when we
Definitely.
do it. So when you were shooting, when you were the photo director, but you were also shooting, were you getting paid as a photographer to shoot it plus your salary?
Yeah, that was always my
That's
deal.
cool.
Yeah, so I always negotiated in the interviews where I would have my salary plus health benefits and all that, and then I would shoot on the side. And it sort of came to its culmination. I left New York in 2003, right after the big blackout on the East Coast. I'm sure you
Yeah.
remember
I
that.
remember that. Yeah.
I sort of had that, freak out moment, and I'm not a fearful guy, but I was literally doing and standing in the same spot when the towers on 9/11 went down.
Oh,
And so I sort of had this weird deja vu feel. And, both times I ended up having to walk from Midtown down to downtown where I lived. And I was like, I gotta get a change of pace. I gotta get out of here. And at the time I had thought about maybe moving to London, but I had heard that photographers got paid absolutely horribly in London. So I opted for LA, and I figured this would be my outlet to start moving on to shooting full time. And I figured it would take, 2 months, 3 months, maybe. People in New York would sort of forget about me as the photo editor because it definitely held me back a little bit, I think, as a
yeah, I can
photographer.
see that.
People
Yeah.
either were okay with it or they were not. It was definitely a divided line. And I would give it about maybe 2 weeks at most that I was in LA that people completely forgot about me in New York.
Oh
So that
God.
yeah. And I actually hated LA that time. I did not appreciate the weather. I didn't really like the lifestyle or anything appealed to me. So I went back to New York. And when I went back, the reason I went back was I had a friend who was a creative director at a media company that had a couple of magazines at the time. And he wanted me to come back and be the photo editor. And I said, well, I'm actually trying to move on from being a photo editor, but I have an idea for you. Harry used to always talk to me about Life magazine and how it kind of worked where there was photographers there who sat at a desk most of the time and would assign the photography. And they had other photographers like him that would basically be out on the field all the time. And I said, if I became your chief photographer for the media company, I can assign the photographs that we can't get to. So let's say, for example, it's a remote location and it's going to cost $1,000 for the flight and a bunch of expenses on top of that, and it's out of our budget. I'll assign somebody local, and I know I have the skills to assign somebody and direct them to take a image that will fit in our magazine. But if I can get there and the cost is right, then you've got somebody on the inside and it's going to save you money ultimately to do it that way. And because of my experience as a photo editor, I knew how to run the budget. So I
Right.
showed them on a spreadsheet, like, this is where we're going to save. And as it turned out, I was able to prove it out where we saved about $27,000 a year
Oh
by
wow.
having this formula. And we got, creative with it where if I was in Los Angeles for a shoot, we would have one of the other magazines. Eventually, they went from 2 to 5 magazines. One of the other 4 magazines to make an assignment happened while I was there, and then we could double up on my trip and cut the cost of everything in
Oh
half
yeah.
and assign
Nice.
it to each magazine. So that worked great. I ended up bringing 2 more photographers in underneath me, and I ran the photo department. And like I said, we regularly were under budget, so it worked really, really well. That sort of was really where I built my portfolio because I had access to celebrity for Private Jet magazine. It introduced me to the world of cigars, which is we're going to talk about my book that's coming out that it's on cigars, and it sort of put me in a position where I was getting a ton of experience. We were doing something like 30 shoots a month,
Oh
so
wow.
we had volume going on.
Yeah.
But then, unfortunately, in 2009, I was in Nova Scotia on assignment for them. Came back, the magazine company folded
Oh,
and gone. And that was really what kicked me out of the nest, which I think at that time was right, and I needed it. It put me out, and then since then, I've been full-time freelance.
I guess the good thing is with you in the position you were in, you also got to see the rates.
Yes,
So it helped you because that was when I first started off. That was the hardest thing for me to figure out was what do I charge for this? Because I can't charge $500 because I know it's more than that. Luckily, I had some decent mentors I could call on the phone and go, "Hey, what would I charge? What would you charge for this?" But I guess being in the position you were in, you kind of had those numbers more or less in your head already. So that was sure that
for
helped.
sure. And I knew what most shoots can cost, and that the budgets at that media company were really, really small, but
Yeah.
I like to sort of liken it to the idea that we were kind of creating Vanity Fair style portraits with a shoestring budget. And that experience, often I thank people when they say this, but they're sort of like, yeah, you're the guy we could throw into a closet with one light and you'll figure out a way to make it look good. And that's true. It's how I sort of operate. What fits in a taxi cab? What can you take down into New York City subway and get on location and still make it look like it's a big,
Yeah.
production? And that was our task at the titles that we shot for. And that experience is invaluable because it puts me in a position where if I only have one light, and like I said, everything I do is based off one light, which is the sun,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
um, I'll figure out a way to make it look good. And, you know, as to your point about the budgets and rates and everything, that I think is the thing that's hurting our industry the most right now is that you have photographers working for peanuts
Oh
and
yeah.
they're okay with it or for free. And it's really difficult for people who are established and have been around for a while to compete against that because people are inevitably going to hire those people whether it's a mistake or not,
Right.
and they don't realize that the cost of what they're paying for, it can hurt them, more times than not.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I think it's a lot of times you're getting young, new art directors in there who are hiring or producers who are hiring these people and they don't understand like, okay, this can go severely wrong when you're hiring somebody who all they've done is shoot Instagram pictures or whatever, and then you need them to shoot this major production and then they show up and they don't have a clue what to do and that
Absolutely.
kind
I
of
think it's
thing.
a major flaw in what we have around us now, in that our sort of brains have come conditioned to what looks good on Instagram. And if you actually blew that image up and looked at it, you'd see the flaws in it and you'd see that it's actually not a good execution for a multitude of reasons.
Oh
And,
yeah.
I always say that a good photograph is something you pause to stop and look at, right? And now, because our brains are so fixed to this quick swiping,
Mhm.
we might take that in for fraction of a second, where it used to be like maybe 3 seconds
Right.
constitutes a successful image, right? Now it's a fraction of a second. And people don't know the difference between a great image because you got all these filters that help, and you got this and you got that, and all these little tricks that look great on your screen, especially being backlit. But
Mhm.
I see you have prints on your wall, like
Yeah.
what it was like.
Yeah.
If you look back at prints of back in the day, like you see they're not even sharp, like compared
Oh
to what
yeah.
brains are conditioned to how sharp it looks now, which is so insane,
Oh yeah.
especially with these new cameras.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. I think did you see that shot? I think it was for Porsche that somebody put up on LinkedIn. It's just like a Porsche sitting underneath this overhang, or it was like a little bridge or something, a little place you could drive your car through. And there was light kind of coming down, but then there was the shadow of the overhang or whatever it was. And the car was half in it and half out of it, and it was an awful picture. But Porsche was using it on their Instagram or some kind of social media. And it literally looked like somebody came out and said, "Hey, pull the car, just park it right here real quick." Shot it with their phone and then went back inside to throw something up. It was terrible.
Well,
But
this is the world of UGC, right?
yeah.
So I mean, it's strange because I've been asked to do things that look more like
Mhm.
less professional, if you want to put it that way, so
Yeah,
that it
yeah.
looks more like user generated.
Right.
And it's wild to me, and it's in some sense great. It means that maybe we don't need to spend $6,000 on a camera, or $60,000 on a camera.
Yeah.
Maybe we can use our phones. Maybe we can use alternative solutions. But I'm in this for the long run, right? That's the thing I've learned from Harry, very much so. He's 94. I don't know if he shoots anymore, but he's still selling prints and he's still out there, right? And the length of his career, and having been a witness to his resurgence in his career probably 3 times in the time I've known him,
Wow.
changing from Chrome, which he was shooting, and he was
Hmm.
starting to struggle, I think, with as he was getting older to hit focus and things like that, to then going to negative film. And when he went to negative, things got better, and his exposures were better, and all that. And then to go to digital, and then another resurgence for him, where it just made somebody who's not necessarily seeing with their eye as well, but still seeing with their brain very well,
Right.
and still capable of capturing. And obviously, advancements in lighting, where you can work portably, and it's a lot easier than it used to be. And
Oh yeah.
you're not reliant on just what you can plug into a wall, and
Right.
or a small strobe. So
Yeah.
seeing those things, like for me, I don't know if it's an antiquated view, but I'm sort of thinking in my mind, hold the line, just keep going, just keep pushing through. All these things that are popular for a minute are going to go away and things will come back. They'll always come back. Seeing that there's a resurgence in people shooting film,
Mm.
I believe that things always go in these circles. So, you know, you hang around long enough, you'll be able to kind of keep going with what you do.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree. All right. So do you remember what was your first job full time? Like when you became a full-time photographer, no longer a photo editor, do you remember what your very first gig was?
Um, I don't remember the first one, but I could definitely say that uh, I was starting to do some outside assignments at the time that I moved from LA back to New York, still for Muscle and Fitness magazine.
Okay.
And one particular art director was promoted to creative director about the same time that I moved back to New York. And he would still assign me. So I was kind of doing those, you know, quietly on the side while I was working for that media company. And he just liked the way that I worked. I had a fitness background in that I originally went to college to study that stuff.
Yeah.
I took to fitness photography very naturally, and not that I intended to, but it just sort of worked. I was good at the instructional stuff, and I was fast. That I could get through a tremendous shot list at a gym that was crowded and dealing with people and all that kind of stuff, and cranky bodybuilders who are depleted of carbs and all those
Right.
things. And he just gave me cover after cover after cover during that period of time, which
Nice.
I think gave me that sort of leg up,
Mhm.
leaving the safety of a full-time gig. And he was having me, all of a sudden, I had more time now that I don't work for this media company. And now I'm getting the opportunity to shoot magazine covers for not just the media company that I was already doing, but now for these, you know, major brands as well. And simultaneously, I picked up MTV as a client, and MTV was huge for me. I
Nice. Wow.
literally got thrown in. I did one job for them. It was a movie poster down in New Orleans for like a prom, teen prom type show or
Right.
something. And it was a fun challenge to get it done. They liked it and immediately threw me in with The Real World,
Oh, wow.
Jersey Shore, and then
Damn.
ultimately the show The Challenge. And between those three, they kept me quite busy for quite a long time, up into probably '09 to 12, which is when that was all taking place, are still probably the three best years of my career in that I made so much money back
Yeah.
then, which gave me that confidence to be out of the nest. And it also solidified that I never wanted to sit at a desk again.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. I mean, you've shot, just from what I saw on your website, you've shot tons of celebrities. I mean, we had The Rock, Conor McGregor, Steven Tyler, Morgan Freeman, Jeff Bridges, Bob Odenkirk, Keegan Michael Key. I mean, dude, you've hit a ton of great celebrities. Was there anybody that like was your favorite to work with, or one that was just, and you don't even have to mention names on this second part. I'd like to know the name of your favorite to work with. But was there anybody who was just like, like the Van Halen rider where you got to pick out everything, all the red M&Ms got to come out or something like that? Somebody that was just like, or like I saw, who was it? There was a TV show on for a while about two photographers who, man and a woman whose name I can never pronounce properly, so I'm not even going to try. But they had a show out and they were shooting Lindsay Lohan, and she was literally like 12 hours late. And they hung around waiting. I was like, I'd have left about 5 hours into it tops, but they stuck around. And I don't know if that was set up for the show or if it was really the way she was. But I mean, have you had anything like who's your favorite that you've worked with, if you have a favorite? And then like, was there one that was just like some story where it's just like, it was a pain in my ass, but we got it done. The pictures turned out wonderfully.
Sure. I mean, I've always paraphrased Imogen Cunningham saying that it's the picture I'll take tomorrow kind of
Right.
thing. But I mean, you know, here's the thing. I realized a couple years ago that one of the failures I've made throughout my career is not really being present in the moment
Oh,
sometimes, where
yeah.
I'm so focused, and this is again is Harry's influence. Your job is the job, right? To
Hmm.
get the job, and it doesn't matter what it costs you to get it done, but you're there to get the assignment done. And that mentality is fantastic, but it also removes you a little bit emotionally from situations. So I wouldn't say there's one. I'm not super impressed with celebrities. They're just people to
Right.
me, and I've always sort of approached it from that perspective.
But
And
besides Albert, you never had kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm getting to work with you moment.
uh, I would say that so Morgan Freeman I had for 9 hours. That was
Oh
insane.
wow,
We were in his
that's a long
hometown.
time.
Um, we gave him a break
Yeah.
point because we were like, all right, we need to wait for sundown, to shoot the next thing.
Right.
So we took a little break there. But other than that, I mean, he was amazing. And then he invited us to dinner with him and his friends afterwards, which was
Oh
just
wow.
crazy. And I'd heard the opposite about him from some, people in the industry. So it wasn't my experience. Jeff Bridges, insane. I mean, that was like literally the 2 minute shoot and wasn't expected. I was on a different assignment, and it just so happened that he was across the street at another hotel as this assignment was happening. And the photo editor said, "Hey, our writer just came in and said Jeff Bridges is coming over. You're going to have 2 minutes with him." And I was like, "Great, let's go."
Yeah.
And every frame was good. I think I shot 18 frames, and
Oh wow.
everyone, he knows
Nice.
what he's doing. And I
Yeah.
said it to him when I met him. I know you know what you're doing. I knew he was a photographer as well.
Yeah.
So I basically just said, "You do your thing, I'll do my thing." And he gave me a look, and I knew he was done, and that was it.
Oh nice. Wow.
I did get an assignment to go shoot. I'm a huge Springsteen fan,
Oh
and
yeah.
I got an assignment to go shoot the show in the LA Forum. The downside was it was from the sound booth, so you're 500 feet away,
Yeah.
which is horrible. You're with five other photographers jammed in. Never had that experience. Never shot a concert like that. I've shot live music, but always from the stage,
Right.
and to be creative and dynamic and all these things. It's not good for me to be stuck. I don't even like tripods if
Yeah.
I don't need it.
Yeah, me
So
either.
I did think to myself, okay, well, I was pushing to get a portrait, but it just wasn't going to happen. The other limitation was you only had three songs and then you had to
Yeah,
go.
I've heard that for a lot of people who shoot live.
Yeah,
So if you get three songs, then you're gone.
horrible. And so um, you have to make the most of it, which is fine. I'm not worried about that part. But I did the thing which I never do, which is that I took my face away from the camera for a moment just to take in what was going on. And honestly, it was like a wave of emotion, and it was too much for me. I was much better off being a robot and just getting the job done. So I put my face quickly behind the camera again and just shot away. But that was a very, very cool experience because I'm such a fan. Uh,
Yeah,
I still would love to do a portrait of him and actually get to experience that. I think only he and probably Arnold Schwarzenegger would make me a little nervous, but nobody else really. Everyone else, I'm there to do the job, and
right.
it's all good. But all these different experiences, honestly, I can't put one above the other. Bob Odenkirk, we were together. It was during COVID. It was just me at his house with him, and that's it, and
Oh
nobody
wow.
else. Not even a rep, not even a groomer, nothing.
Oh nice.
And
Wow.
so it was just like getting to spend an hour with him. You can look at that and say, wow, that's even greater than the Morgan Freeman experience, or that's greater than the Jeff Bridges. You only got 2 minutes with him. You didn't really talk to him, blah, blah, blah. They're all great experiences. And like I said, I think I operate too unemotional in more cases than not.
Right. So when you decide to do, you said this is your third book that you're coming out
Yes.
with?
Well, third cigar book.
Third cigar book. Okay.
I've got, I think, 5 books total that I've done.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So what made you decide you wanted to do a third cigar book after you've done two cigar books?
Well, it was pretty interesting. Aaron Sigmund is the writer that I've been working with since 2007, back at that media company. We launched a cigar magazine, which he and I never knew each other before that, and we just worked really well together right out the gate. And so it was one of those situations where, he's somebody that I've been able to work with for many years. Right after Double Down was the media company, when they folded, he was trying to purchase the magazine and keep it going, but wasn't able to for a multitude of reasons. So then we took the work that we had done and created a book for Playboy, which had never done a cigar book, which is pretty amazing considering they have a
Wow.
big history with cigars. So we did that book first, and then a couple of years ago, we did a project for Arturo Fuente, which is a big cigar company, and Assaline Books, which is a French publisher out of New York that we worked with. And while we were working on that, Aaron, who's people call Sig. Last name being Sigmund, but
Right.
ironic because his cigar is Sig. But he said to me, "Do you realize that you've been shooting cigar stuff for like 16 years practically, and probably have had more access to people, places, and things in the cigar industry than any other photographer?"
Oh,
And I was like,
wow.
"No, I never even thought about it." Again, going through these things without really realizing what situations I've been in. And at the time, I've been to pretty much every country minus two or three that have something to do with cigars, whether it's manufacturing or growing or whatever the case might be. So he then said, "I think I know our next book." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, you have this archive of imagery that a lot hasn't been seen. And I've been writing cigar stuff for 35 years at this point. So our next book is going to be a biography." And at that point, we sort of started formulating the idea. His 35 years writing about it, my 17 at the time we started it, of shooting it. And so we went through this incredible archive of 15 to 18,000 images that I have and narrowed it down, knocked out categories and figured out what I was missing, what places I maybe haven't been, or maybe I was there when there was no tobacco in the fields or things like that. And I spent the better part of that next year, almost every other week, on the road somewhere to fulfill the rest of the book. And
Wow.
that includes going on to Australia, which I had not been to, which to visit the one and only like high-end cigar shop in all of Australia.
Yeah.
So I literally went to go shoot one thing, which was crazy. And then London, and to photograph the scene in London as well. And then back to Cuba for the second time, and as well trips to Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic and places where I needed to kind of fill in some of the gaps. So some probably 21,000 images later, we then narrowed it down to this book, which is going to be, I believe it's a total of 174 images, including the cover,
Wow.
and his 80,000 words about his experiences in this world. So that's what's coming out at the end of March.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Where
it's
would we be
very.
able to get it?
So you can pre-order the book now at sigculture.com, which is SIGCULTURE, and it will be in retail stores as of March 30th, cigar shops, that kind of thing. We're going to be doing some book signings around as well, so that will get announced also on sigculture.com, as well as my Instagram, which is at Ian Spanier.
Very cool, man.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, congrats on the third cigar book.
thank you.
I don't know how you narrowed down 20,000 images to 170 something. That's a lot
I
narrowing
probably
down.
retouched because we did a number of different edits, and I probably retouched. I think I had the tally at one point because I was keeping a spreadsheet of it. I think I was around 415 images at the time, retouched and ready to go, and then we narrowed it down from there. More than anything, between myself and the creative director Liliana Guia, who's worked with Mad Dash Publishing, is the publisher. She's worked with them for years. The three of us sort of have a very similar vision, and so quite often it would just come down to picking between one of two images of the
Yeah.
same subject, or in many cases we all just agreed this is a better image, and then thankfully they gave me sort of final say on a lot of stuff, and I was able to say, this image is better than this image, and I'm very good at removing myself from it, not what I felt that moment that I shut
Yeah.
under
Well,
the
that's
shutter.
impressive.
Yeah, it's and that's again that photo editing experience, being able to remove, especially when I was, shooting as Ian Spanier, but photo editing as Ian Spanier, it's two very different mindsets. And so
Yeah.
I could edit my own work very quickly and very well so that I could say, well, this image is not as good as this image, or whatever.
That's yeah, because my daughter used to play travel volleyball and she was very good and like we thought she was gonna play in college and she was just like, and not interested. But so I would shoot every time she went, and I ended up putting together a personal story on volleyball, travel volleyball, and I had I don't know 2, 3, 4,000 images, and I was trying to narrow it down. And for me, just narrow it down to like 100 and something out of 4,000 was very difficult. So I can't imagine going from 20,000 images, to under 200. I'd have been there forever. Yeah, so I think that's amazing that you can do that. I wish I had that ability a little more than I do. I think I'm okay with it, but not to that point. I
I'm
mean,
very hard on myself. I'm never satisfied. That's part of it.
yeah,
I will definitely say that a lot of what we've sort of talked about since finishing is this idea of um, where I pushed Aaron and Liliana the entire piece of time where I was shooting new stuff was essentially saying everything from here needs to be epic. That is the goal for every image. Now, it's not going to happen every time, but I'm
right.
going to approach every single thing you send me to as creating an epic image because, quite honestly, when I look back at the older stuff, there are successful images in there, but what I can do now is so much different and better.
Right.
There's things that I will absolutely 100% say I probably couldn't have made that image in 2008, and now that I know how to deal with this or how to handle this kind of a situation, or now that I've seen this factory, 3 times, I have better idea of what I can do here, and I can go in with a plan as opposed to just sort of loosely shooting, and then add to the technology that, cameras today can handle these high ISOs where when I started shooting that stuff, like, man, I was pushing 800 and I was like, this
Uh-huh,
is
yeah.
and even now being able to retouch some of those images, thanks to, Lightroom and
hmm
Photoshop and even I use, I don't know if you've heard of Avado AI, but
Mm-mm.
I'm an affiliate for them. So if you want a discount, I'll hook you up. But
What is it
uh,
again?
it's called Avato AI,
How do you spell it?
EVOTO or ATO. ATO, I think it is, AI. If you go to my Instagram, I tag them all the time. But
Okay.
they uh, they approached me probably about 8 months ago and didn't really like the software, didn't like the interaction. The biggest thing that I found with all of those AI things at the time was that it only worked in small files. And going back to what we're talking about with these images that are small, yeah, they look great small, but what about a high res image, right? Then about fast forward about 6 months from that point, they approached me again and they said, "Oh, we made some advancements. Please check them out." So I looked at it. Not only can you output high res files, but it sings. And the things that you can do to save yourself time, insane.
Really?
Um, yeah, I did a video on it. There's a couple out there. There's one on B&H Event Space, if you want to check that out on their YouTube. And then I did one for PPA recently where I just touched on it a bit in part of the retouching lesson. That one's with I think it's with a hat maker. And then I have a big one coming out where it's like dive into this program, and that should be out soon, as soon as PPA is over, which I think is this week in Texas. But great software in terms of saving yourself time. I mean, even background removal stuff, like really amazing. And anyway, my point was that being able to even use that on some of the older images and sort of resurrect them to be simultaneous with the new images, where you've got this technology from these cameras now that allow you to take an image a certain way.
Mhm.
I was able to marry images from 2007 to images from 2024, and to be able to do that I thought was super important in the book, because you can't have this archival stuff and be so like evident that it's archival. You should be able to
Right.
look at this, especially in an industry that hasn't changed very much since its inception in a lot of ways. It's hand rolled cigars, they're premium cigars.
Yeah.
So it's still the same process that was there, back in the days when they first, really became popular.
So are you using mirrorless now? Or are you still using the DSLRs or?
Yeah, I switched over to mirrorless about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Definitely took my time. The first mirrorless camera I tested, I absolutely did not like it. Struggled with it a lot. I felt like it missed focus all the time. And then, of course, that technology jumped very quickly. I've always been a Canon guy, but
Yeah.
that was with a Fuji. And I used to be with Fuji Film, so I thought about going back, and I knew they were coming out with that medium format one, which I really wanted to use. I used then the Pentax camera, and I loved it, the medium format one. And I was trying to get something going with them, but it just didn't work out. And so I kind of always kept falling back to Canon. And then at the time I was speaking with Canon's location down in Costa Mesa quite a bit. So I was in kind of tight with their tech guys, and he's like, "If I was you, it's Canon R5. Let's have you check it out." So he got me one to play around with, and it took a minute, but then I was like, "Wow, this is pretty sweet." And then I got one. I got rid of one of my 5D Mark II,
Mhm.
and then picked up the new R5 II last year, and it's crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, the technology and the AI inside there is really impressive. And I haven't fully grown to love it yet, but even the focus where it follows your eye is pretty amazing to be able to do that. Or at the very least, to be able to assign the camera to pick a subject
Yeah.
and stay on that subject. That's huge to be able to do that. So, absolutely loving that aspect of mirrorless. And it just says to you, you don't need the $60,000 solution. I would love to shoot with that, but
Right.
you don't need it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and then I've been shooting a bit with a Leica as well for the last couple of years, more as a challenge to myself. I got one of the fixed lens
Hmm.
and use that as my vacation camera because I don't
Yeah.
want to carry a bunch of lenses with me and whatnot. And it's a challenge to only have one perspective.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
um, I enjoy it, and I've used it a little bit on a couple jobs, but for the most part, I'm using it as a personal, you know, personal project camera and vacation camera.
Yeah. I'm getting ready to go to Italy, and I have well, I bought like a little $1,000, $1,100 Lumix, that LX100. So everything I read on was like it was the same specs as the Leica. The only difference was the price, from what I could tell. So I went in and bought that, and I really like that camera. And I used it last time I was in Italy, and we're going back. My daughter's over there right now, so we're going over to see her. And I'm going to bring. I just bought a Z4. I mean a Z8, a Nikon Z8. So I just bought that last year. Love that camera. I'm going to take it with me, but I think I'm going to also take that little Lumix with me too because it's so the difference in weight and size is so different.
Yeah.
But I looked at the size, size difference on the images. I was like, okay, if I really want to crop in or I want to blow up, the Z8 is going to be a lot nicer for that. But I got some nice size shots out of that little Lumix thing. It's not a fixed lens, so it does zoom in from 28 to 70, I think, or something like that. But I just use it on vacation, or if I'm going on a little trip.
That's the thing for me is that I didn't want to have to bring a bunch of stuff on
Yeah.
vacation,
Yeah.
and I used to when was shooting film regularly, I used to really only walk around with either that little bad boy you got behind you on the shelf there,
Oh yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
or I had a SL66E, which I still have. It's one of the few film cameras I kept because it had a meter inside, and I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. And I love the square format. It's like how I see things anyway, and the lens is just absolutely gorgeous. Um, so I kind of wanted to return to that a little bit slower of an ability, and
Hmm.
that's like it definitely is a little bit slower, and then as well. Still be able to have that big file. And
Yeah.
I've definitely, I mean, I shot an image in Ireland on the first trip I took it in 2023, and we were at this castle, and it was like one of those magical moments where this horse came out of nowhere and just like walked up and was like hanging out with me, and I took this
Oh
picture
wow.
of the horse against the castle wall, and I blew it up, and I have it in this huge canvas print in my living room, and that thing is just so tack sharp, it's insane. And
Yeah.
that's that quality of it. And now you know what you're paying for with that lens, and so yeah,
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I would probably miss by not doing the fixed lens or interchangeable lenses by doing that. But I was like, it's for vacation. I'm just gonna bring this little thing. But yeah, I mean, probably at some point I'll switch it up and do that. But right now, I'm like I said, I'm taking the Z8 with me, and we'll see how it goes. How if I get tired of carrying that thing around all day and just leave it at the apartment or whatever.
yeah.
At this point, so in your career, is this mostly a word of mouth thing for you on jobs, or are you still sending out like promos, email promos, printed promos, that kind of thing?
So I am a hustler. I always have been.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe that you stop trying to get work, you will stop getting work.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I'm pushing all the time as much as I can. I try as often and it's super, super frustrating, but getting in-person meetings, it's really, really difficult these days, especially with
Yes,
people that work remotely or whatever. Zoom meetings, okay, but it's still not quite the same. I need to sit there across from that person and tell
I
them
agree.
exactly on the images and sell myself. That's where I do my best selling. And I'm not a good salesman. I'm good at talking about what I do and what I can bring to the table. So missing those opportunities really is a struggle, I would say,
Mhm.
for most photographers. Printed stuff only for leave behind.
Yeah.
There's just literally no point. Nobody's taking mail like
And
that
even on the leave behinds, I found some people was like, "Hey, I would love it,
anymore.
but I don't have anywhere to put it. You know, I
Exactly.
will bookmark you in my computer, but I don't have anywhere to keep that."
It's a tough one. So I regularly do about every 5 to 6 weeks, I'll do an email blast. I have a pretty big list at this point that I'm continually, that's how I actually met you on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great resource for getting email addresses.
Mm.
Interacting with people is tough, but
Yep.
at least getting that email address, if they connect with you, is a better chance than not.
Yeah.
So I've used it a lot for that. I do some in-person portfolio reviews. I don't love the pay to play model. I
Yeah.
don't think it's very successful. I did get a job from Netflix last year, which was like 8 years. I've been trying to get them. Finally worked out, met the right person, and he brought me in. So I'm hoping that will continue that relationship, but that's a rarity in my
Yeah.
book. That's going to happen from those pay to plays. Um, so yeah, it's a tough thing right now. I think I work a lot on my social media presence, um, simultaneously pushing what I do and the work that I do, and letting the images sort of speak for themselves, hopefully. And then also sharing my experiences with other photographers. I always like to support other photographers and, you know, bits and pieces of my knowledge and experiences. And I, behind the scenes, I have no secrets. You know, I'm
Yeah.
very open booked about what I do. I don't think it's rocket, science. But the reality is that, even if you light exactly the same as me, you're never going
Oh
to take
yeah.
the same picture as
No.
me. It's
That's
not
the way I
possible.
feel too. I don't have any problem telling you how I shot it, whatever, because we're going to shoot different no matter what. So,
Even
I
if
mean,
it's not going to happen.
I had an art director one time literally was sitting, I guess he wanted to be a photographer or something because that dude was right over my shoulder every shot. Or sitting to one point, I had to tell him to pull his foot out of the way because it was in my picture and it was in my frame. To my assistants, just like couldn't stand him. My assistant's like, dude, you want me to just beat his ass? And I was like, no, he's fine. Let him be. He's fine. He's not going to get the same shot I'm getting, even if he's right over my shoulder. I promise you, it's going to be okay.
I
Yeah,
um I don't like to shoot around other photographers, so it is interesting to me when I do speaking engagements and the photographers want to shoot. Like I'll give them their time, but I don't
yeah.
like it on my shoulder. I went to I'm not a car guy at all, and I went to a thing they have out here called Luftkilt, which is like they gather like 9,000 air-cooled Porsches and park them around some cool facility. So Modernica Furniture Factory or the San Pedro Pier, things like
What's it
that.
called?
Luftkilt, it's a German word.
I
And
have a friend who has an air-cooled Porsche and is all into them. So he
I
probably
think they,
knows about it. He lives in Pasadena, so he probably
oh,
already knows about it. But
he doesn't, he should be there because it's
yeah,
huge. I went the first year and I was probably one of three people there with a camera. And then I went the second year and there was probably 150 people with cameras there.
oh wow,
And it had rained, which is rare in LA, obviously, and
yeah.
it had rained that morning, and then the sun came out. So we had these super dramatic skies, and all the cars were covered with raindrops. It was really cool, and there was puddles everywhere. And I'll never forget, I went to go take a picture of this one really old Porsche sitting on a wall with a big dark cloud behind it and puddle reflecting the Porsche in the ground. And as soon as I lift my camera, I literally felt the lens on my shoulder.
Wow. Okay, that's
Listen to
a,
the up. And
it's a little
and
much.
the rest of that day, every time I went to point in a direction, I would feel 4 or 5 people behind me doing the same. And
What, he's following you around?
it just drives me crazy. But like I said, if it's me setting it up, and then I'll invite people to come in and here, take my strobe trigger and fire
Right.
away, but
Yeah.
not on my
Yeah,
shoulder.
I would not want him over my shoulder. Yeah. This one art director, it's the only time it's ever happened. He would stand like just kind of off a little bit or be over here, and I think he ended up going into banking or something.
Real estate or banking, that's where they go.
Yeah, it was like 3 years later. The dude was nowhere to be found. I think I looked him up, and he was a banker or something like that, from what I can remember. Yeah. So we've been on about an hour, so it's about time to wrap up. But so, what would you say? This is my last question for everybody. Would be the strangest, most interesting, and coolest thing that's happened to you since you started in the whole photography industry?
I'd have to go back to what we were talking about earlier, where I've sort of navigated through this world without always being aware of what's going on and the crazy experiences that I'm having and the things that I've pushed for in order to get the job done. A great example of that, which is one of my friends, is a writer who's traveled many, many places around the world with me on jobs. We we got sent to go cover the largest gym in the Navy, which is on the USS Reagan. And at the time, the ship was in the undisclosed location in the Gulf of Oman and flying sorties, which is missions into Afghanistan to drop bombs. And they sent us to Bahrain, to which we stayed for a night, then got on what they call a Greyhound, which is a kind of looks like a bus with wings, and you sit backwards, and then they tell you to put your head between your legs, and you land on the carrier with the hook, like Top Gun.
Wow. Really?
So this is a full-on Top Gun experience right here, okay?
Yeah.
And
Holy
I mean,
shit.
literally sleeping under the flight deck of this gigantic ship with two nuclear reactors as they're, launching these planes. And I needed to do a portrait of one of the very fit servicemen on the deck of the carrier. And so we have a meeting with the deck sergeant, and I tell him, in my ideal world, I'd like you to position one of the F-15s like this and the other one like this, and I'm going to shoot in this direction, and it's going to be this time of day, and blah, 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 blah. Not even thinking about it whatsoever. This is
Right.
me directing what the photo shoot needs to look like. And um, we walk out of there, and we have, by the way, armed guards following us everywhere because you can't walk around that ship. Like, you are being escorted in the middle of the night. If you have to go to the bathroom, they stand outside your door. They walk to the bathroom with you, walk
Oh,
back.
wow.
You locked in your room with the gun and all that stuff. Yeah. So we walk out, and the writer turns to me. He's like, "Do you realize that you just told the deck sergeant where to stick two $30 million fucking planes?" And I go, I didn't think about it that way. And he, to this day, this is like 20 years ago, he still tells the story like it was yesterday, that he was so amazed that I just had that sort of tunnel vision, not recognizing how,
Right.
I mean, they're flying missions in to drop bombs, and I'm here, oh, but the picture is going to look better if we do it this way. And we had, probably about 50 servicemen standing in front of the planes and like, it's just crazy to think
Oh, man.
you just did that, right? And then you go to the other stories too, right? The Jeff Bridges and the Morgan Freemans and the Bob Odenkirks and I mean, Steven Tyler. I worked with him twice. Like, that was crazy in itself. I mean, I don't like being in pictures, and my assistant was like, "Can you just get a picture with me and Tyler?" And I was like, "Sure." Took a picture of them together, and then Steven's like, "All right, your turn." And I'm like, "No, no, I'm good." He's like, "Come on, come on, come on." So then I get there, and he puts me in a headlock. He's like rugging me around. Like, it's crazy, But again, I'm not thinking of those things in the moment, and so.
Right.
To an outsider, yes, you might look at the portfolio and be like, "Wow, this is crazy, this is crazy, that crazy." I'm thinking, well, you know, if I'd only had an Octabank that was this size for that job, I
Right.
could have done it this way. I'm reassessing all the time. So, yeah, I think it's starting to now sort of sink in a little bit as I'm maybe getting a bit longer in the tooth, but
Yeah.
I just love what I do. So it goes again back to the stuff I was talking about with Harry, like having that sort of end goal of having a longevity of a career. That's really what I'm after. And whatever happens on the way, fantastic. It's all part of it.
I think that's very cool. I mean, I wasn't shooting Steven Tyler, but I was doing early in my career, I was doing a shoot for a high-end lingerie store that was opening up in New York. And I realized I was way, way, way more focused on the lighting and the framing than anything else when, like, I told my brother, and he was like, I was like, there was a shot of this girl just in a like a thong. It was just for the thong. So it was just her butt and a thong. And my brother's like, "Oh my God." I was like, "Dude, it didn't even register." All I was thinking was your butt's not close enough or whatever. The angle's not right. So I need you to switch it a little bit and the light's hitting from here. And I said that was the point I knew. I was just like, okay, I'm definitely a pro photographer at this point because I wasn't there going, wow, that looks great.
Yeah. I could definitely say I've been there. I did a few swimsuit issues for the fitness magazines, and same deal. People are just like, "You're in Las Vegas photographing, half naked women or whatever." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
I'm more worried about what that sun is doing, and if we can get this in before the sun goes over the scrim." And
yeah,
you
me
know,
too. And the less the model talks to me, the better it is. Just let me just do my job and don't like
I
chat
mean,
it
I
up.
would definitely say that, like, especially with the celebrity world, like, I ended up being a double in art and psychology in college because I had those psychology classes from the track that I was on for the fitness stuff, and you know, there is a big piece of being able to speak to your subjects and
Oh
interact
yeah,
with your subjects to get what you want. And when you have those, I always go into every celebrity shoot with the assumption I'm going to have anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and that's it.
mm,
And when I get longer, great, I just do more, right?
right,
Um, Especially given that I have multiple lighting setups and all kinds of stuff going on in my head. But, the assumption is they're all going to be like Jeff Bridges, where you got to get it and you got to get it fast. And
yeah,
so that assessment is super important when I walk in to meet the person and I say, this is what we're doing today. This is what it's for. This is blah, blah, blah. Part of that is me really assessing them. Are they going
mhm,
to be somebody that's given me nothing, or are they going to
right,
be somebody that's going to work with me and do this with me? And, when you meet the ones that do it with you, like a Tyler, Brendan Fraser, all those people, like it's a totally different experience. And, not that Bridges wasn't doing it with me, but he already had his
oh
plan,
yeah,
knew what he was going to do. Whereas Odenkirk also, it was organic. We were just
mhm,
basically saying, he said, "Oh, I just did a shoot for this magazine and we shot here, here, and here." And I said, "Well, I don't want to do any of that then." And I said, "Okay, what about this, this, and this?" And then at the end, probably the best shot I took that day was something I saw when I walked in and I kind of marked it. And I asked him if he wanted to do anything else because I thought he was done.
right,
But he, I could do one more. And he's like, "I always like that sculpture on the wall over there." And I was like, "Perfect. I know exactly what to do." Because I already had it in my head when I walked in to check the location. Had him stand there, had him actually looking at my C stand, and I did a profile shot of him framed within this piece of artwork. And I ended up printing it up and sending it to him as a thank you. And he wrote me back a handwritten, like amazing, or sorry, not handwritten, but it was an email that he sent me that said that I captured something about him that was, he used the word adorned. And I
oh
was,
nice,
said I revealed something about him, which he was literally looking at my C stand,
right.
which is why you should never tell the story behind a picture because it
But
doesn't
hey, I
resonate.
mean, if that's what he thinks, that's
Yeah.
great. I mean,
But
yeah,
again, that's part of what I was kind of alluding to is I didn't appreciate that for the moment, but wow, what a cool
oh,
thing.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think especially in your position with the celebrities, you've got to have that ability to speak to them in a way that they get it, and you know when to stop talking, and you know when to give them a little more direction. And I think that's always it's a great because I've had a few where it's like smaller level celebrities, and we set up and they come in and they just knock it out. And you have like you said, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I shot Kamala Harris, and I was told I had 30 seconds,
Yeah.
to shoot her. And it was when she had a
That should be
mask
the
on.
look
So it kind
of
of sucked. But she wouldn't take the mask off. But I ended up having 2 minutes.
full
But,
man.
yeah, every shot was with the mask. I was like, because there were like multiple people in the room. It was COVID was huge, and they'd canceled like 3 weeks earlier because her first assistant or whoever it was had had COVID, and they were just like she had on double mask, and so it kind of sucked. But it was one of those things where you got 30 seconds. They ended up having like 60 to 90 seconds, but it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But dude, thank you so much. This is cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Congrats on the book. Can't wait to see that. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be very cool. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
appreciate it, man.